Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Erin, and if this is your first time here, welcome to Booked and Busy. Today's video is going to be me reading my most anticipated release of 2023, Lightbringer by Pierce Brown, book 6 in the Red Rising Saga. But to read Lightbringer, I have to first read Iron Gold and Dark Age. I've been waiting on these because I knew I had read a second book in the Pierce Brown series before, and he wasn't going to get me when we did not have an announcement or a release date or a title or anything for book 6, which I thought originally was going to be the conclusion, but is instead the penultimate book to the saga. Over the course of this video, I'm going to be reading Iron Gold, Dark Age, and Lightbringer, as well as going to the Pierce Brown signing event in my city for the Lightbringer tour. So you're going to get to watch all of that in this vlog. It's going to be completely spoiler free for Dark Age, Iron Gold, and Lightbringer. And there's going to be a small, short, brief spoiler-filled section at the end to really get into my thoughts on Lightbringer. So if you're interested in watching this, if you haven't read the second era, you're fine to watch it. If you haven't read the first era, I think you're also fine to watch it. But this just maybe can give you a bit of inspiration to pick up the series. This is my favorite sci-fi series. And there's no competition, to be quite honest. So let's get into the vlog. Okay. So we are 6 days out from the release of Lightbringer, book 6 in the Red Rising Saga, and I have been holding off for almost 3 years to read the second era because we didn't have any updates on book 3, which is supposed to be the finale, but it's now the penultimate book. So I've given myself 6 days, like I said, to read Iron Gold and Dark Age. 3 days each, averaging about 200 pages a day, so that on Tuesday, the 25th, which is release day, I can read Lightbringer and have it finished by Friday, because on Friday, I'm going to Pierce Brown's event in DC, and I want to be able to ask him why he did what he did, because I know he's going to do something. So I started it today, and I am now 198 pages in, but for the sake of the check-in, it's 200 pages because that was the end of part 1 and we're starting part 2. So Iron Gold picks up 10 years after the conclusion of the event in Morningstar, and the story of First Era was essentially winning a battle but not winning the war, and essentially starting a war, kicking off a war. And so we're picking up 10 years later as we have this fledgling government, and we have these various perspectives that are on these different paths that have all been impacted by this new world order. And contrary to what happened in the original trilogy, this second era is multi-perspective. So we follow Darrow, the Reaper. We follow Lyria, a Gamma Red that's on Mars, who is have been liberated from the mines and is now living in a work camp. We follow Ephraim, who was formerly a member of the Rising, but now he's working as a freelance thief, and he's a Gray. And then we follow another character who was present in book 1 but is believed to be dead. So they're going by an alias called Castor. Won't say who they really are, but that's our fourth perspective. And the issue that I'm having with this is that I don't care about these other people. I only care about Darrow. And so essentially, if all parts being equal, Darrow is only 25% of this story, which means that the lion's share of the perspectives I don't care about. So the setup has been interesting. We're following each of our characters as they're on a bit of a different journey, and as we get to the end of part 1, it's set up where they are, but each character, each perspective is going to be in a different place, doing something different in a different circumstance, headed into part 2. And it's interesting to see how these relationships that have continued and evolved past where we saw them at the end of Morningstar are continuing to develop and have developed, and some have strengthened, some have weakened, some have essentially evaporated over the course of the last 10 years. And in this one, we see Darrow as a father, as a husband, well, he was always a husband, but you get what I'm saying. And he's 33 now, and so some people view him as a tyrant and a warlord and someone who wouldn't know peace if it slapped him in the face. And so he's reckoning with this society where there are rules and regulations about what he can do, and he's not a part of the rebellion anymore. He's a part of a organized government, and the being beholden to that government and their laws and their rules and what they say, even though he is essentially the leader of the military. And we meet him at the end of the Fall of Mercury, and that's like the opening section where we had these like disparate perspectives, and we see what this looks like, and we get a glimpse of another Iron Ring. And Darrow took some liberties because he feels like he knows best, and it isn't to say that he doesn't, but the liberties that he took were against that of the democracy and the republic that he helped form. And on the one hand, I get it, but on the other hand, I'm like, okay, Darrow is the Reaper. Without Darrow, there wouldn't be a democracy. There wouldn't be any of this. Y'all would still be licking the boots of the gold. So like, coming from my man is a little crazy, but I digress. So I'm enjoying this. I'm having a good time. I stopped to film this vlog update. I am going to read more of this tonight. It's only 9 o'clock, so I have like an hour and a half until bedtime, and I've done everything I need to do. So I might watch a little bit of YouTube, but I might read another 50 or so pages just to get ahead on tomorrow's reading goal, because I work from 7 to 6 tomorrow. So it's going to be a very busy day. So if I can get ahead today, that'd be great. So I don't have as much I won't have make sure to stay on track, because I have a firm deadline of when I need to be done with this. But I'm enjoying being back in this world. I'm enjoying the political landscape, and I will say I've forgotten a lot of things. Like, some of these people, I've forgotten who they are. Like, I remember the broad strokes, I remember the major things, but a lot of the details, a lot of the relationships, because there's pretty much a vast number of characters in the first series, and the cast of characters gets larger as the books go on. But like, there's like a 4 or 5 page dramatis personae in the beginning of this, and some of these people, like, their relevance to the plot and to our characters is like, for me. But on the other hand, I think it's almost better to have had that gap, because this is already so different from the original trilogy that I think if I read it too close together, it will almost pale in comparison. So now I have some distance for that story. So time has passed in world, and time has passed for me, and I think that's the best thing, because I can go into this with a little bit of distance from that story and give it the opportunity to stand on its own. And I've also heard Pierce Brown speak about Lightbringer and about Darrow and Red God and things like that, and he's like, in the beginning of the series, he kind of wants to take a step back and get other people's perspective on Darrow and what that looks like. And because we've always been in his head, he's essentially, we've always assumed that he was in the right, and maybe that isn't necessarily the case. And so in Lightbringer, he also talks about like putting Darrow on the back foot, because setting that up so that in Red God we see Darrow at his sharpest, not at his best, but at his sharpest. And so when I go to the talk next Friday, I want to have the full scope, and I want to have all the information available to really appreciate whatever he talks about and what he was hoping to accomplish with this particular book that's coming out, Lightbringer, with this series, just whatever. So I'm really excited. I haven't been to an author talk since Fonda Lee, so I'm really excited to see what's going on there. So I rambled on enough. I'm gonna read some more, and I'll talk to you all tomorrow, maybe when I read another 200 pages, but it'll definitely be at the end of the day, because I have a long work day tomorrow. So bye. Hello friends, happy Thursday. So I read like 100 more pages of Iron Gold since we last talked, but I'm not about to give you my update just yet. I'm gonna give you my update once I get to my 200 pages for the day, but I am about 50% through. But I came home to some book mail, so I thought I would open it with you guys, because I didn't order anything, and see what's in the box. I worked a very long day today. I left home at like 7:45 this morning. It's 7:08. I just got home, and I've been working the entire time. So love that for me. But I have the next 3 days off, so we really love that for me. Okay, let's see what's in. It's Lore Olympus I had said earlier in the year or last year that I was like I wasn't gonna be collecting it anymore because I didn't love the most recent two, but I was like I'll add it to my wish list and I'll think about it because I actually really like this green color and now I can read it. I was just thinking about trying to get it in the library. Who sent it? Oh, it's been a minute. Just wanted to say hi and happy summer from MJ. Thank you, MJ. This is so exciting. Definitely gonna read this probably this weekend because it's such a quick read. Very excited to have this. Thank you so much. I literally just walked in the door, but I was so excited I couldn't wait to open my package. So I am going to take these jeans off, get some comfy clothes, turn my air conditioning on, and I'm gonna sit down and read more of Iron Gold because I need to at least get to page 400 to stay on track. So right now, right here, page 318, chapter 34. So I'll be back to chat with you soon and give you another update. Good morning, my friends. Happy Friday. So I'm here with another update. I am here, just got to part 3 of Iron Gold, and 2 of our 4 POVs have just collided in a very explosive and unexpected way. Our other POV that isn't Darrow definitely thinks that he's smarter than what he really is. 400 pages essentially into the story and I'm still finding myself not, let me turn the brightness down, not really caring about these new characters. I think Castor's POV of the 3 new ones is the only one that I'm kind of interested in, and that is because that character and the things that are going on in that perspective are more closely aligned to the original trilogy, and that specific set of events have been pretty high action since the beginning of the story. So that is, you know, working well for me. You know, I can definitely say that at this point in the story, it's enjoyable enough, but it's probably my least favorite in the series thus far. And I knew that going into second era, it was going to be a bit of an adjustment because it is very different than the first era. It's not supposed to feel the same. It's supposed to be a different set of circumstances, and part of that is the scope of the story getting wider. And as much as I'm, you know, enjoying it, like, it's not bad, and it's still a lot better than a lot of other books that I read. Going into a Pierce Brown book, I'm expecting greatness. And I think if this was like the first book in a different series and I didn't have this previous series to compare it to, I probably would be enjoying this more. But based on I fell in love with this world through Darrow's eyes, and so seeing it from other people is just harder to get behind. And saying that, I do think 2 of our POVs, my least favorite ones, also contribute to them not being very likable. Them not being very likable people to follow, and also for the majority of the story, very little has been happening in their POVs. That has changed as we got closer to this, like, part 3, but very little had been happening prior to their POVs, and they're both very, like, kind of sad and miserable, and y'all know how I feel about that. So I have read a bit more, and I'm gonna be finishing this today. Today is day 3 of the 3 days that I allotted myself to read Iron Gold, and so I'll probably head straight into Dark Age tonight. So I will come back to you when I have my final thought. Okay, friends, so I finished Iron Gold yesterday and I really enjoyed it. So the second half was definitely a lot stronger to me than the first half. I think that it took some time for both Pierce and I to get our bearings with this new style of storytelling, with these new characters and these new directions that this story is going in, that just doesn't focus on Darrow and the Rising and things like that. Like, the story has pushed beyond that, and it took some time to really get situated in it. By the end, my favorite POV is still Darrow's POV, but following Darrow is probably Castor's POV because a lot of interesting things are going on there. And then the 2 other POVs, I don't really care about Ligria or Ephraim, but I liked how they all kind of came together in this like central storyline towards the end. Things got really explosive and things got really violent, and when the slicing and dicing got started, that's when they had me. Like, there's this one scene, I think I may have mentioned it yesterday, I'm not sure, when a character gets both of their forearms chopped off and then they get beheaded, and then this other character gets chopped in half. Someone gets a knife that goes through their forehead, it comes out through their chin, and the violence just got so heavy. And Pierce writes about violence so beautifully. That's one of his strong suits, like the way, like, you see me giggling and like getting excited, like it's just so well done. So I settled on a 4-star rating for this one. I really enjoyed it, but it took me some time to get into it, and the first half was definitely giving like 3-star vibes, especially apart from Darrow's perspective. I like how we're seeing people challenge Darrow's ideas of things and Darrow's beliefs, and we're seeing him, and Pierce like has talked about this like on Instagram and in interviews, that he kind of wanted to put Darrow on the back foot a little bit, and everyone to a degree is kind of doubting him and what he believes and the way he strategizes. Like I was looking up quotes in about Red Rising, and one of the quotes from book 1 is when they were at the Institute, Darrow's like, "You don't follow me because I'm the strongest." Pax is the Telemanus. "You don't follow me because I'm the smartest," and that's the Mustang. "But you follow me because I know where I'm going and I know how to get us there." And like, the callback, like, that is even more true in this second generation, the second era, because everyone wants to believe the best. Everyone wants to believe that people are doing things for everyone else's best interest and putting their best foot forward, but that is just not the world that we're living in. And I really appreciate how so many things are coming full circle from the original trilogy. Not even just the original trilogy, but from the first book, because there's another character where they have been fighting this war for 10 years, and they say, "My daughter would have lived in peace, but you brought her war." And that is a quote from Darrow from book 1. He's like, "I would have lived in peace, but my enemies brought me war." And so I really appreciate how not only is this story going beyond where the story originally started, but it's still harkening back to the themes and the things that were happening there that are still very much a part of this current storyline. And there's like death and violence and the betrayal and all these other things that are typical of a Red Rising story, and some of it I'm like, Pierce is trying to pull a wool over my eyes, because baby, I didn't see the body, so I know it's not the case. Like, I know it's not the case, period. So I really appreciate where this is going, and I'm very much looking forward to diving into Iron Gold today. So today is Saturday, and so today diving into Dark Age today. So today is Saturday, and I gave myself Saturday, Sunday, Monday to read Dark Age, so that on Tuesday I can read Lightbringer as soon as I get it. So that is still the plan. I am going to do some reading, and I will give you my initial thoughts soon. Hi friends, happy Monday. I started Dark Age, put it over here, and this book is very aptly titled because the age is quite dark. Starting in chapter 1 and the prologue, but really chapter 31, if you know, you know. I keep asking myself, like, how can it get worse? And Pierce keeps showing me how. So I am 300 pages in, very much, well, I guess I'm 100 pages behind schedule, because I started this on Saturday. I should have started on Friday when I had extra time, but I started this on Saturday, but Saturday was the day where I was filming and editing and trying to get Sunday's video up, so I only read like 75 pages on Saturday, and then on Sunday I read like 225 pages, and this book has been so good I have not wanted to put it down to update you. And it also hurts so bad. Like, I can't even. I've been talking about it with Jocelyn, because we've been going through it together. Like, the kill count, you know, I'm like, so thus far in the series, Golden Sun is my favorite book, and Dark Age is kind of coming for it. Like, I'm actually quite nervous, because Pierce has said that Lightbringer, which comes out tomorrow, Lightbringer is his darkest book, and he wanted to put Darrow on the back foot so that in Red God it could be him at his sharpest. And I'm like, babe, he's been on the back foot the entire second era. So if this is already him on the back foot quite significantly. Pray tell, what is going to be the back foot going to look like a Lightbringer? So this one also is structured quite interestingly, because in the first part it's only Darrow and Castor. I'm continuing to call Castor by his alias. If you read the book, you know who he is. But rather than spoil it for someone who is still reading the original trilogy or hasn't finished the original trilogy or whatever. So we're still, that part is only Castor and Darrow, just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And then when we get to part 2, it's just Virginia and Ephraim. And Virginia hasn't had a POV this entire series. Well, at least in Iron Gold. But she has a POV now in the things that we are seeing and learning in her POV. Quite hard on the heart. So then it's just Virginia and Ephraim. And now where I am, I just got to, I want to say, maybe I just got to part 3, but I could be wrong about that. But we're finally at like 40% into the book. We're finally going back to Lyria's point of view. And I'm intrigued to see what she's up to, because I could tell that Pierce was wanting to situate us in the thick of the battle and things on Mercury, because Darrow and Castor were both on Mercury, and the battles, and it was very heavy, and the betrayals, and so many interesting things were happening, and it is very dark, and it's very heavy, and it's very bleak at the beginning. Well, not at the beginning, at the whole book, but when you get to Ephraim's POV and Virginia's, for a while it's a little bit lighter, a little bit easier on the heart, and then it starts to go downhill again. So we have some mysteries that have been solved, but I don't know if it was worth the cost that of having those questions answered. So I am about to head to work, and I'm going to read more while I'm at work. I have a pretty long day today because I work both of my jobs today. So I will update you at some point today. Might be in between. It might be like late tonight. So talk soon. Good morning, my friends. Happy Tuesday. It is Lightbringer release day. Hold on. So I have been busier than anticipated the last couple days. Yesterday I had like a dinner date, and so that threw off some of my reading time. But I am now 445 pages in, and I have about 300 pages to go. So like I said, I do plan on finishing this today because I want to start Lightbringer today. And I'm gonna go get Lightbringer after I get off work. But I will say, I feel like the story has slowed down quite a bit. Not necessarily because action-packed things aren't happening anymore, but because the part of the story that we're in, I'm in part 3, which is called Treason. This part of the story is focused on Ephraim and Lyria, and those have always been my least favorite POVs in this era of the series. So I'm just not as invested. And like, honestly, we've had dragon killings and plane crashes and parasites and raiders and like all types of things have been happening in these POVs. But even in this one, I'm still just not very invested in them. And I think I don't even know if it's because they're not likable, because I think that there are other characters in this series who aren't necessarily likable, but because they're villainous or they're really smart or whatever, I can get behind them. I think I do like Ephraim more than Lyria, but I don't know that those are two characters you really can like. Their storylines kind of have crossed across both books, even though they've for the most part been in different places, but they've impacted one another's storylines quite a bit. And where we are in the story is like a new world order. Like not one, not two, but 3, 4 different groups of people are deciding that this is their time to shine, and they're going to be at the forefront of the things that are going on and controlling what's happening. And then we've had a reveal about specific characters' heritage and what we want, well, what the characters in the story want for them, and that's very interesting. So I'm interested to see how that plays out. But I'm about to go grab myself a smoothie or an acai bowl and then head to work. So I will talk to you guys, and the next thing you'll see will be B-roll of me getting Lightbringer probably, unless I'm at work reading and something just crazy happens. So until then. Hello my darlings, it has been a couple days since we last spoke. As you would have seen in the b-roll, I picked up Lightbringer on release day and I'm currently reading it. But I did pick up 2 other books while I went to the bookstore on release day, so I'm going to tell you about those quickly before I get into my Dark Age review and my initial thoughts on Lightbringer. So I picked up a new YA release. It also came out on the 25th, and this is Bonesmith by Nikki Palpretto. This is supposed to be Gideon the Ninth meets, I forgot what the other comp title was, but I'm really intrigued by it, and it does give big Gideon the Ninth vibes. So we follow this girl who is a bonesmith, and she's a ghost fighting warrior, and she's trying to solidify her place in the noble house of Bone. And after failing her qualifying trial, she's sent to the breach where the vicious dead roam unchecked. It might have been Game of Thrones, because she's going almost out to the wall to defend against the White Walkers. That's kind of the vibe. So determined to reclaim her family's respect, she has to end up working with this guy named Julian, who is an ironsmith from the House of Iron, and he is from her family's sworn enemy house. And they spend just as much time fighting each other as they do the undead when they discover there's more behind the kidnapping than either of them knew. They'll need to work together to combat the real danger, and the growing alliance is brewing between the living and the undead. I'm intrigued. I read the first book in Nikki Palpretto's other series, which was her debut. It was Crown of Feathers. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't a new favorite. I didn't continue on with the series, but this really intrigues me, so this is going to be the featured YA release for the summer new releases reading vlog. And then I also picked up the Barnes & Noble exclusive edition of Masters of Death by Libby Blake. My Barnes has this out early because it doesn't come out until, I want to say, the 8th of August, but it was really pretty, and it has these like gorgeous end papers that I just had to have. And this is another re-release on tour of a previously self-published Libby Blake release. And it says, there's a game that immortals play. There is only one rule: don't lose. And I know that my bestie Mina read this and really liked it. We follow a girl who is a real estate agent and a vampire. And this man is a medium and also the godson of death. And she asked him to help her out with this ghost infested mansion, and they have a poltergeist, a demonic personal trainer, an angel or reaper, and a lot of magical creatures involved in this, but also kind of in a contemporary setting. So I'm just really intrigued by this. I think Libby Blake has very unique concepts, and none of her books are really like one another. And while I didn't love the Atlas Paradox, I really enjoyed the Atlas 6, and so I've been collecting Libby Blake books. So I may do an episode of Backlist Diaries for her, or may just put this in the summer new releases reading vlog. So those are the things that I hauled. Let's talk about Dark Age. So I finished Dark Age, I think, on Tuesday, so I started Lightbringer on Wednesday. So this is a book that I have some conflicting feelings about, and I don't think I'm alone in that. Most of the people whose reviews that I have seen or read have given this like a 3-ish star, and I personally find this to be like a 3.75. I'm rounding up to a 4-star on Goodreads, so I consider it a 4-star. But this, while it's not my least favorite, I think Iron Gold is my least favorite in the entire universe. It just does a lot of things that I'm not a fan of. So I will say the beginning of this, when we're like right in the trenches of this battle on Mercury with Daryl and like the other POV is Lysander. At this point, I'm just telling y'all it's Lysander. I think it's not a secret that he is alive and he is one of the main POVs in here. And we're in the trenches. Like, I felt like I needed a cigarette and a drink, a glass of whiskey after every chapter, and it was so intense. But the falling of Dark Age for me is the same thing that kind of happened in Iron Gold, and it's just that I am not invested in these new POVs, and they're such a large part of this story that it's just it does take away from my enjoyment. Whereas the first original series was Darrow's story and Darrow and the Rising, this second era is much more about the Republic and Darrow's almost fall from grace and him being human, us as the reader and the people in the world realizing that Darrow is human and he is fallible, because this series focuses quite heavily, at least these first two books, on his first major loss out on Mercury. Like, he is one of two people who has conquered a planet, but these second two books kind of focus a lot on him losing that, and his first major loss in the 12 years that he has been the Reaper, and he has founded working with the Rising and the founding of the Republic and things like that. So this series is very much about the politics of the society versus the Republic and all these outlying factions and how there are plots within plots within plots. And Pierce Brown has said that he wrote this book to almost test the reader and see how much they could endure, because a very big theme in this book is enduring. So we're fighting a war on all fronts. Every character and every perspective has some impact on the war front, depending on which direction that is in. And so in this one, we're having these 4 POVs. So we're following the events on Mercury with Darrow and Lysander, and then we're following the events on Mars with Ephraim and Sephi, and what the Obsidians are up to, and the Volklands and the things that they're trying to do as they have departed from Darrow. And so in this series, we're also seeing Darrow lose some of the core factions that made up his success and his most stalwart defenders, and one group of that people is the Obsidians, because the legend of Ragnar and Sephi the Quiet and the legions of Obsidians who were supporting the war effort, and they have been stalwart in their support, but time and time again the Republic has failed them, and so they've decided to go their own way and do their own thing. And we're exploring that and the consequences of that here, as well as this like fringe outlook unit of the Obsidians. And then in our red POV, another thing about this is that all of the other POVs in this novel are people who have been wronged by Darrow in some way, whether it was extremely personally or at a distance of his actions and those of the Rising and of the Republic. So we follow Lyria, who was freed from the mines, and her people were sold this dream about what life would be like now that they're aware of the world around them. They're no longer enslaved, but not only have they been living in pretty deplorable conditions, but they also are victims of the Red Hand, which is this fringe organization that has sprung up from the Rising, and they're much more violent and erratic, and they want to punish the people who were at the top of Red society when they were in the mines, and those are the people of Gamma. And so we're dealing with that. And this person, Lyria, at the beginning of Iron Gold, she experiences a lot of loss, and she blames Darrow and the Rising and the Republic and all that. And so we see her have this reckoning, and in this installment we see a continuing of that reckoning, and we see her come face to face with those people and those things that she has almost despised from a distance, and her having to reconcile that with also the mistakes that she has made in the ways that she has inadvertently assisted the people who are against the Rising. And we follow all these different disparate points of view, and at certain points these various points of views come together, and they are possibly on the same side or on opposite sides of these various issues. And the beginning of this was so strong, the ending of this was so strong, but the middle, and this is showing you the tedium of war and how war is on every aspect. There's no part of life that is removed from the struggles and the tedium of war. This entire time Virginia has told Darrow, she's like, endure, trust in your wife to do X, trust in your sovereign to do Y. And he's like, I will endure. And Pierce is also testing the reader and making them endure. And my endurance is low. So I think I've come, especially as I've started Lightbringer, I've kind of come to the realization that for me, this second era is never going to be as good as the first era to me, because I do not have this connection with these other characters. And as much as the things are going on in this war and the scope and all these other things, like at its heart, I do feel like this is still a character driven series. And if this was a new series that's just set in the same world with entirely new characters, I would probably feel differently, and I would probably feel stronger and towards these characters. But because these characters are also being pitted against the Reaper and pitted against someone who we all put our back behind and was in support of for the first trilogy, and really he's still the main character in this new story. And so the parts that where Darrow is in the story are the parts that I enjoy the most, and I personally think those are the parts that are the most interesting. Whereas the other parts, I'm just like, when am I gonna get back to Darrow? And so Dark Age does something new, and it's also continuing in Lightbringer, where there'll be an entire section or part of the book where there's no Darrow. So I'm going like 150 pages with no Darrow, and then reading about these characters where I'm just not that invested in what they have going on and what they're doing, and I just don't care. And I'm just like, how long till I get back to Darrow? So I think Dark Age is a good book. I think it is very vast in scope, and I think it expands and gives you a lot more detail and a lot more nuance of the understandings of what other people's experience was like in the Rising, and how there are, even the heroes, they're still victims of heroes and people who have not been the priority of the Rising, and who still are at the dregs of society, or still have essentially like a boot on their face even in this new age of the Republic. And while I appreciate all of that, I only care about Darrow, and I care about the people who we were invested in the first trilogy, like Mustang, Victra, Severo, Cassius. Those are the people who I am the most invested in, and I just don't think these other people can't compete. Like, they can't compare. So that's that. And then with Lightbringer, I'm kind of dragging my feet reading Lightbringer, A, because of the reasons that I already shared, and B, because like when I was running through Iron Gold, I was like, I got Iron Gold, I got Dark Age, and then Lightbringer when it comes out. When I was reading Dark Age, I'm like, oh, I got Dark Age, and then I'm gonna be reading it, and then Lightbringer's gonna come out. And now I'm at Lightbringer, and I'm like, there's nothing. Like, we know Red God exists, it's gonna be there, but he's writing it, so we don't know when it's gonna be. And like, there were 4 years between Lightbringer and Dark Age, and after reading Dark Age, I can definitely see why it was so challenging to continue the story beyond that, and how it would be impossible to wrap all those threads up in one book. And so I'm just, on one hand, I'm savoring it, but on the other hand, I'm also in a section of the book where there's no Darrow for 150 pages, and I'm just, and Lysander makes me so sick. I cannot stand him. He is everything that is wrong with Gold. He thinks that he's the hero, but he's really the villain. And this is, Lysander and a number of other characters are showing, not only just the reader, but Darrow and the other people of the Rising, the cost of mercy, and not finishing things that you start, and choosing to be the bigger person just creates problems for you down the road that may be insurmountable. So 200 pages into Lightbringer, and today is the day of the Pierce Brown event. He's coming to DC, and so I have about 3.5 hours before I need to head to the bookstore where that event is being held, and I'm super excited. I don't think they have been doing signings at these events. I think that there are signed copies available, but I don't think he's been like signing and personalizing. But the venue here, I feel like, is a lot smaller, so I'm hoping that I can get a copy of Golden Sun signed, because it's my favorite book in the series, and then maybe get my copy of Lightbringer signed, if at all possible. So I'm gonna take them with me just in case. But in Lightbringer, what do I have to say? Again, Pierce Brown I've heard him speak about Lightbringer quite a bit, on the promo tour and things like that. And this is him saying he kind of wants to put Darrow on the back foot. And he's on the back foot. He's backpedaling. It's not going great. And I'm just, he's like, Darrow will be at his sharpest in Red God. And I can see the seeds of that being sown, and how Darrow's going to level up, and how as formidable a general, an imperator, an arch imperator, a warrior, a fighter, all these things that Darrow are, he still has room to improve, and that's kind of been pointed out to him in this book specifically. We've seen that in the other books, but it's really like the conversations are being had now, and we're also seeing other fringe elements of the Republic that have been waiting for their day to shine. And we're also seeing this series also focuses a lot on Daryl having to make the decision of whether or not he is a general or a father or a husband first. And and we also see that, you know, comparison between him and Severo, because we see the breaking of that relationship a little bit in the beginnings of Iron Gold, and Severo, you know, makes it pretty clear, I'm a father first, and Daryl decides that he is a general first, and he's like, as much as I love my wife and my son, you know, those are two individuals, whereas the billions of people in the Republic are counting on me, and they can't do, there's no one who can replace me. And that's been also very clear throughout this series. He is the one who motivates these people. He is the one who has broken the chains and who has liberated these peoples, but he can't be in one place at one time. He cannot do things by himself. And so when he doesn't have the support, he's still the person who is blamed, but also the person who is responsible, and also the person who needs to help everyone at the same time. And so seeing those conflicting interests when you are a part of an established government versus a fringe element and rebelling, and there are less rules, and now you have all these other elements to contend with. So I'm enjoying Lightbringer, not as much as I would have hoped, and that's because at this point I don't think the series is what I would like from the series, and what Pierce Brown's intent with the series are at different places, and I have to respect that. But I am still enjoying my time in this world, and I'm sad that like there's nothing after this. So the next thing you'll see will be hopefully some B-roll from the event, and I'm gonna read more of Lightbringer, and I'll talk to you when I have more thoughts.
So I don't think I need to encourage you to give him a warm welcome, but please join me in welcoming Pierce Brown.
Is it working? Yeah. I don't know. They told me it was air conditioning, but there's so many bodies in here. I thought this place filled to capacity last time I was here, so thank you guys for coming out. This is crazy. So I got the chance to do it at the beginning of every one of these. And it started with New York, and I pitted New York and Boston in a rivalry. And I said New York did a great job at what I'm about to ask you to do. Boston took it personally, did a great job. And then we went to Atlanta, and I was in a church, and shit escalated. So what I'm gonna ask you to do is, you know, I'm gonna ask you to howl, but here's the thing. I know there's something inside you that thinks it's dorky. It's okay, this guy's wearing a wolf collar. I'm pretty sure you kick all around, so if it's dorky, you see someone holding back, you fight him, alright? Alright, so on a count of three, well actually never mind. On a count of three, I want you guys to give a crazy ass howl. Because these books mean a lot to me, and I thought no one would read them. And I couldn't have been happy to be wrong. So please, on 1, 2, 3. Alright guys, and then there's one more thing. If you could hold up your books in front of your faces. Y'all are pretty, but books, I mean, come on. As high as you can, I want them straight, like a rate. Oh, that's cool. My friend said I should start a cult, but I said I had commitment problems. Amazing, my mama's gonna love this. Alright guys, so thank you for coming out. This book is extremely personal to me because it was the first time I ran into an obstacle I could not move with sheer force. I used to blitz the books and just write them like crazy, and it just worked. And then COVID happened, I thought, goody, you know, great, I get to spend more time alone. And then I got like crazy depressed, couldn't write. Then I wrote 400 pages, just forced it out, and it sucked. And so I threw it away. And then restarted the book. And Darrow's journey in this book is really personal because he had to figure out how to go forward by taking a step back. So I hope it means something to y'all, but I have 700 pages of book for y'all to read, so why do you want to hear me speak? So let's get to the Q&A right off the bat.
Oh.
Yeah? Who's got a question? This brave gentleman.
Pierce,
Yo.
what is the most ridiculous costume somebody has worn to one of your events?
Oh. Someone came as Roke, but like after he died. One to begin with. But for Minotaur, it was always kind of like, I just like wondered, what about the kid? What about like the little sociopath in the class that loved Paradise Lost too much? And also did HGH and steroids. And also is really smart and also is rich, and you're just like, oh god, you know, he's kind of like Patrick Bateman, like in space, you know. There's an idea of the Minotaur, but there is no real me. I don't know. It's for me, it's really id gone amok. You know, it's kind of like the imagine if he's so different than Darrow, but they do the same thing, right? And so I was thinking, like, what's the inverse of Darrow? It's just a guy who has no shame admitting that he loves this. So it's a hedonist, you know? It's almost like Bacchanalian. He's like very much like the god Bacchus, or Dionysus. And I found that to be my real connection to him. Yeah, grapes of wrath, you know, and that pun kills me, you know? I love that, yeah. So let's do, I think right there. Yeah, right there, yeah.
You mentioned your hat process earlier. I
Yeah.
want to know if you ever put a name back. Like, I can't do it.
No, it's against the rules.
Can we change
Once.
the rules?
One time.
Who was it?
I can't tell you. It'll seem cheap. And I just like, I'm like, all right, I gotta rethink the rules in this thing. Rule 3, drink 6 shots of Jack Daniels. Sorry, that's rule 1. I should have more when I came up here. Rule 2 was basically like, if they go in the hat, you have to be willing to part with them. And I had some characters in there that it was like, okay, but where do I go with the story if I do it like this? Pax, while lovable and great, was not essential to my plan. He was a very cool part of the plan, but he was a supporting character. And I realized I just took out like his Mustang was originally in there, and I was like, wait, I can't kill 2 love interests. Like, and then I'm like, but then that's not very, okay, I gotta rethink this whole thing. But I was 22 and I didn't think anyone would read my book, so, like I said, yeah. I haven't.
Okay, so what you would have just seen was me at the Lightbringer event with Pierce Brown. I had such a good time, even though the situation was quite hellish. For whatever reason, I got there an hour and a half early and all the seats were already taken. And this was a day where it was like 100 degrees outside. So for whatever reason, the air conditioner in the event room was also not working. So when I got there, it was 80 degrees inside, and by the time that I left, it was 87 degrees. So that was quite rough. We were all dripping sweat, Pierce included. But it was such a good time. I love listening to like my favorite authors talk about their inspiration and like the behind the scenes stuff with the book and what led to certain things and how decisions get made in the writing process, and just learning, you know, a bird's eye view really of all the things that are happening in my favorite series. And I got to ask him a question, and he said your girl was so eloquent, you know. I got to take a picture with him. I'll just pop in the picture right here. I got my book signed. So I got Lightbringer signed, and I got Golden Sun signed, which is my favorite book in the series, and that still is the case at this point, having read the second era as well. But I think Golden Sun could be topped by Red God, but I have sat on my thoughts on Lightbringer for a week because honestly, like, this vlog has been spoiler free up until this point. And A, I wanted to really sit with my feelings, and B, I really struggled to figure out how to verbalize my thoughts and feelings about this book specifically without spoilers. So I decided to do a spoiler-free review and then also do a spoilery section because there's so much nuance, there's so much that happens in this book that you gotta get into the spoilers. You got to. So that's what we're gonna do. So my spoiler-free thoughts. Lightbringer, having read it, honestly, having read Dark Age, I could see why the next book would be extremely difficult. Having read Dark Age, I can see why it was nigh impossible to wrap up this story and all the threads in one singular volume. I can see why it took 4 years for us to get another book, or 3.5 for the writing portion, because there was so much ground to cover. And one of the things about Lightbringer is that truly it harkens back to that first Red Rising book. You see so many of the same beats get hit, and I don't mean this in a way that is repetitive or to demean the book. I mean, you see Darrow almost get rebuilt, and if you've read the first book, you know what I mean by that. But you know, one of the when we finish off the original trilogy, spoiler for you still, we see Darrow at the height of his power, essentially, and what we find in this 10-year time jump between Morningstar and the Start of Iron Gold has been a period of unparalleled success for Darrow. It's been success after success after success, and while he is a god among men, okay, that is not sustainable, okay. And in the beginning of Iron Gold, we see the beginnings of some tactical mistakes on Darrow's part. We see his first major failure, and that thread continues through Iron Gold and into Lightbringer, honestly. But primarily that specific element is wrapped up in Dark Age. And so essentially we see this series us discovering Darrow on the back foot. Pierce himself has said that Darrow has never been a regular guy. Even when he was a miner in a hell diver in the mines of Lycos on Mars, like, he was that guy. He was the hell diver, the youngest hell diver. He had gotten bit by the pit viper. He, you know, he just had that special something, and so he's always been above the rest. And then even as a Red, when he was at his lowest, he was still above the average man. And so we have seen just bouts and bouts of excellence and mastery, and him being the strongest or the smartest or the most efficient or whatever in any room that he's in. But now we finally see an adversary that he can't beat on sheer strength and determination alone. And so we see in these first the first two books specifically, and probably the first half of Lightbringer, Darrow being at his lowest and being on the back foot and really questioning who he is, what he is doing, what he stands for, all of that. And in Lightbringer, we also see the revitalization of Darrow. We see him become a new man again. We see him be rebuilt from the inside. We see old wounds, both physically and mentally, be healed, and a new path forward laid out for him. And Pierce Brown also has mentioned in like interviews and stuff that, you know, we see Darrow on the back foot, but all of this is set up so that we see Darrow at his sharpest in Red God. And like when you get to the end of Lightbringer, you can see he has literally reached new heights. And I think that would not be believable, it would not be true to the story, if we also hadn't seen him really struggle and frankly fail at what he had first tried to do. So obviously there are so many other storylines than just Darrow, but Darrow is the main character of the series. He is the Red Rising. He is, like people want to say, he is the Republic. Like we saw that very clearly in Iron Gold when people was like, oh no, it's bigger than him. It's not. It's really not. And so for me to really get into the nitty gritty, I gotta like structure this review. We gotta go through Call Pile and like talk about all the elements, okay? And I'm still gonna be in the spoiler free section, and then when I get to the spoilers, I'm gonna let you know. So this is divided up, I want to say, into 4 parts. Look at my signed copy. That's me. So let me see. Part 1 is Circus. Part 2, I want to say, let me just check my ebook. Part 1 is Circus. I want to say part 2, part 4 is Brothers. this is divided into 4 sections, and because this is such an ambitious project, you can definitely tell that Lightbringer is the first half of a story. And so over the course also of these first 3 books in the second era, we see Darrow away from his home, away from his family, away from his friends. He's almost separated from the core of what makes him strong, the pillars that hold him up. Because what we also see, and this is something that I asked Pierce at the event, one of the larger themes, and this is why I also say that the second era, and specifically this Lightbringer installment, really harkens back to that first series or the first book when Darrow is completely alone and almost adrift, and we see him reestablish and rebuild these bonds that have carried him. Because while Darrow is the Republic, while Darrow is the Rising, he has never done anything on his own. He's always had people in his corner, and one of the primary people in his corner, always his number 2, literally at his 6 at all times, has been Sevro. And over the course of the second era, we see Darrow and Sevro both be posed with the question, am I a father and a husband or a general first? And they both go in separate directions. Sevro decides that he is a father first, and the thing that's first and foremost to him is his family. And we see Darrow is like, again, because I am the Rising, because I am the Republic, I have to choose what's best for 10 billion people versus what's best for me, or what's best for my son and best for my wife. And you know, he chooses martyrdom, and he chooses to fall on his sword and be the person, the arm that has, you know, loosed the chains for all these people. He chooses to be that over his own interests, and he and Sevro have a breaking, honestly, and they go in different directions. And so we see them separated and at different points for the majority of this second era. We don't see them come back on together until about halfway through Lightbringer, I think. And so, you know, his family is adrift. His number 2, his biggest supporter, is separated from him. You know, you see at this point the government has kind of like, we don't need you anymore. We've grown past the age of the warlord and the warmonger. People have called him that. They called him a tyrant, a number of things, and we see that as that develops, and like, we don't need you anymore. And so he doesn't have the support of the millions, of the free, of the legions, of all these other things. And we see him try to get through and accomplish all the things that he has done without the people who have supported him and gotten him to the point that he is. And we see him go through a lot of loss, and we see him as he is at his lowest, and he tries to find something outside of himself to become more again, because he still needs to be, even with all his losses, he is still the Rising, he is still the Republic, and he needs to be that because he is the thing that people are counting on to save them. Everyone else is down in the dumps, and the situation is quite dire, and they're like, but the Reaper isn't here. Like, the Reaper's gonna come, he's gonna bring the Armada, he's gonna bring the legions, he's gonna bring hellfire down on the goals and the society, and he's gonna save us. He is our last hope. And where he is at the beginning of this book, baby, he ain't his own hope, okay? And in Lightbringer, we see him find purpose again, and we see this evolution. And we see this with a lot of characters. Evolution is a theme, okay? We see Darrow grow past the Reaper, essentially, and become more. Red God is the title of book 7 for a reason, okay? We see Sevro struggle with these 2 different hives that he believes are these 2 totally different entities, the Goblin and Sevro. And we see that merging and the coming together, that like these are both 2 parts of yourself. And Darrow himself has said in multiple points, it's like, you know, I'm here with essentially without my left hand. And you know, he said, oh, I had to do this thing that's really violent. He's like, it would be easier if Sevro was around. I would feel safer if Sevro was around, because we know each other. We're so in sync. We're brothers. Like we're like this, and so much so that they consider each other's children their own children. Like, they are one family. They are the same person in a lot of ways, in very different ways. And I mean that as everything that they've done, they've always done together. So much so, like, if you know what's up with Sevro's eyes, just if you know, you know. Like, that's how much they are like this. And so being bereft of that, of his brother, and watching Sevro struggle with the things that we as a reader know have happened on Mars and that he isn't aware of. And as much as he is trying and failing to get back home to his family, to be a father, he also is having to realize that his role in the Republic, in the society, is greater than his own interests. And that's just the two of the characters, okay? In this one, like in the second era, we're seeing an expansion of the world. And so I think I mentioned this before, where the Red Rising original saga, or the original trilogy, is a story of Darrow and the Rising. This series is a story of the Republic, and we see the push and pull and the tensions, or how we're no longer this united front, and we have separate interests. And the hardest part of governance is always going to be the people. Whereas you think that you know what's best for the people, what's safe for the people. Once you have created the sense of safety, people no longer think about the boogeyman at night and the hard things that have to be done to maintain this safety and this freedom and these rights that are so hard fought. In Virginia, we see very little of Virginia in this installment. We only see her in part 2, and when we do see her, it is with the siege of Phobos, which is the moon of Mars, and is very high octane, very tense, and we're seeing her as a tactician. And Pierce has said, I love how I'm calling him Pierce, so we besties, we are, okay, but isn't said, Pierce has said like himself as an author, and then in the text it has been said that Mustang is like the smartest woman in the galaxy, basically, or at least in the Republic. She's the smartest. And for me, that's always rang a bit false. And I also want to say I think I mentioned it before, but the entirety of this reading experience of reading Iron Gold, Dark Age, and Lightbringer, I have been buddy reading it with Jocelyn from Jocelyn Reads, and the discussions that we have had, like, I wish I could have that discussion live or in public for y'all, because that's really where we're getting into the themes, the characters, like everything. And some of that's why it's like it's gotta be spoilers, because you can't really get into it as much as you want to get into it without the spoilers. But go check out her channel, bully her into coming back, because we need her in the streets, okay? And we talked about, like, one of the big quotes in Red Rising, the first book, is Darrow saying to the people at the Institute, "You don't follow me because I'm the strongest. Pax is. You don't follow me because I'm the brightest. Mustang is. You follow me because you don't know where you're going, and I do." And that is something that these quotes from Red Rising, and that's why I say Lightbringer harkens back to that first book so much, and it's so the parallel and the comparison, how they diverge, is so beautiful to see, because we also see these very significant relationships to Darrow, and how they evolve and change in their adulthood, because they were young men when all this was happening. They still had Similac behind their ears, very fresh. And now they are hardened. They have experienced life and hardship and a decade of war and all these other things that come with forming this new governance. And one of the most beautiful, most special, most endearing, most heartfelt interactions in this book is the relationship between Darrow and Cassius. And if you have read the original trilogy, you know that is a relationship that started out great and went to shit very quickly and stayed shit until the end almost. And seeing them almost reminisce on the way they used to be, like so much so that they're talking about things and he's like, "Oh, how's that arm I chopped off?" Like, just seeing, we had a Here Come the Cavalry type of moment, and seeing the joy and the I can't even get my words out of, like, this feeling of my friend is here to save me and to save the day. And I thought it was lights out for me, okay? And my friend is here, and my friend is here to put me back together again, because I'm bereft in a sea of listlessness and all these other things, and now my friend is here, and he's gonna guide me back to myself, and he's gonna take care of me. And watching, it's almost like when you have read enough books in general, especially fantasy, epic sci-fi fantasy, you find yourself, you're like, you know what, hold the hell up. I'm smiling, I'm giggling, I'm kicking my feet. Shit about to go wrong because I'm too happy. And Pierce Brown does that to the extreme. And so we see this beautiful friendship kind of rekindle, and it's like, you're my best friend, you're my brother. We shouldn't have been apart all this time. Like, I need you in my corner. I appreciate you so much, everything that you've done, everything that you've sacrificed, and just watching Cassius shine under the light of this love of his friend, this person who he admires, this person who he feels like he kind of wants to be when he grows up almost. It's just so beautiful. And also, baby, we already know Cassius is one of the top 3 razor masters in the galaxy, okay? He is a menace with the razor. And speaking of, I mean, all of them, the men, but we're gonna get into it. Like, also Diomedes, he's such a complex character, and he's one of the few Golds who is actually a good person. He's a good, moral, upstanding person. And seeing that those relationships and all those things form is just really exciting. On the one hand, there are several, again, which Lightbringer only feels like half of the conclusion, because there are several storylines that we just don't visit at all. Primarily, what's going on Luna. If you've read specifically Dark Age, I think is the one, you know that things were getting hectic, quite active. Well, I think Iron Gold, it starts in Iron Gold. Things were very serious on Luna, and we haven't really heard back from what's going on Luna, what Atlantia is up to. Also in Lightbringer, it's like the battle of the villains. Who's going to be the worst? We see the hand that moves behind the scenes, and that we also see someone who truly believes that they are the Lightbringer, that they are the person who is going to save humanity and save salvation, just be the Messiah to the people and guide them back to the light. And it's very quick and very sinister how the covers are peeled back, and we see that this probably is the most despicable person of them all. Lyria is the other red that we follow, and I personally am not the biggest fan of Lyria. I don't feel any connection to her. I think she is also supposed to be like a character who is small but has a great impact, and her impact isn't because she's the strongest or the smartest or the brightest, it's because she is good, and we see that explored, but I'm not really invested in the storyline with her and the folk. Also, like, the action scenes and the battles in here, listen, the Breath of Stone, my goodness, Pierce Brown was so deep in his bag. You know, now that I think about it, I was able to express a lot of my thoughts in a spoiler-free way. So I am gonna, like, overall rating wise, I gave this a 4 stars as well, because as much as I enjoyed it, and this is just true of the second era, as much as I enjoy it, none of the other perspectives mean as much to me or have as much connection to as Darrow. My favorite parts of the other storylines is when they see Darrow, when they interact with Darrow, when they interact with the characters that already exist in this world, which isn't to say that they aren't well done, because they are, which isn't to say they aren't complex and nuanced and involved in the story in various ways, which they are. It's just for me personally, I don't have that same connection to them, and sometimes I find myself like, how many chapters into a Darrow chapter? Or I'm like, ooh, I got 6 Darrow chapters back to back. Or I'm like, oh, I have 7 POVs from this one character. I don't, you know. And if I loved their POVs as much as I love Darrow's, I wouldn't feel that way. And so this couldn't be a 5-star read for me, and that's true of the entirety of the second era thus far. But Red God, Darrow's finally going back home. I think that could be a 5-star. So in the spoiler section, Lysander is the scum of the world, okay? I cannot believe him. Like, he is truly evil incarnate. And speaking of evil incarnate, Atlas, we talking about Mustang is the smartest person in the galaxy. Atlas All-Ra is right there. Also, all that shit can be blamed on Dido, because if she wasn't trying to be co-consul and do this and that, Romulus wouldn't be dead, all of her kids and kin wouldn't be dead, the Garter will probably still be intact, all this other stuff. And Diomedes trying to be a good person, I hope we got out of that, because Lysander can't be trusted. The fact that Lysander killed Cassius after he like manipulated Cassius into killing Atlas because he knew he wasn't strong enough and powerful enough, and Cassius's like redemption arc. Like that's when I was like smiling and reading, and I was like, this is too good to be true. These moments between Cassius and Darrow, and how Cassius rebuilt Darrow, Cassius and Ore giving, essentially Darrow found religion and found something to believe in outside of himself, something that wasn't war, something that brought him a peace of mind, which is what he really needed. And getting reunited with Quicksilver, and Quicksilver being the only person, or Darrow being the only person that Quicksilver really respected in that way, and him healing Darrow, and Cassie's building him back up from his bootstraps and retraining him, because Darrow was finding that the Willow Way had taken him so far in this world, but people know that the Reaper is a son of Lorn, or a student of Lorn Arkos, and the people know that Darrow practices the Willow Way, and so people have been anticipating this and finding ways to fight against the Willow Way. And so Darrow was noticing that even if he was stronger, faster, whatever, because people knew exactly how to combat his techniques, he wasn't decimating his enemies like that. But now, you know, with training with Cassius and healing his body and wounds that he had incurred over the last decade, and change of constant warfare, and rebuilding his mental, Darrow is damn near unstoppable. And we see that in the fight with Fa, where literally Darrow becomes almost a god. He himself finds the mind's eye, and so good. So this has been a really interesting reading vlog, a really interesting reading experience. I hope you enjoyed reading this and watching this with me. If you have read all of the books in the series, let me know which is your favorite. My favorite is still Golden Sun. Like, Golden Sun just is something special. It's something special. But I feel like Red God could top it. But yeah, if you made it to the end of the video, let's leave a horse. This is a Pegasus, but a horse emoji for Lightbringer, and I'll see you in my next one. Goodbye.